Hello, everybody. This is Into the Fire episode number 32, coming to you live from Tulsa, Oklahoma on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Thanks, everybody that's joining us. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. That's what happens when you have an old homicide detective, an old warden, and another old correction officer getting together and having issues with sound. But we made it. And we are here, and I look stress-free because I've got nerves of steel, and I wasn't worried about it. We are glad to be here. It's going to be a fun time. Troy, bring Troy in real quick. Now, Amanda, Troy is going to be joining us. There's Troy. This is going to be one of those rare times. Well, Troy's not there right this second, so we'll bring him in when he comes in. But welcome. I see that people are starting to drop by, and we appreciate it. This week's going to be a fun time. We're going to have a special guest. It's going to be Phil Parker, and he is the former warden of the castle on the Cumberland, which is Kentucky State Penitentiary. And it's just an ominous looking place. It looks like what a prison should really look like, if truth be known. And so he's going to be joining us. He's the author of a exceptionally good book that I'm tearing into right now, and it's really good. And I had an opportunity to speak with Phil a couple of nights ago, and I found myself, hey, Troy. So I found myself, welcome. Bringing you on. You're going to sit in here at the very beginning at the intro, which never happens. That's not what we generally do, but I'm going to do that for you. You might want to turn your phone sideways. I don't know if it'll work like that or not, but Troy's got his Christmas tree in the background, which looks pretty incredible behind him.
I can't hear. I don't know what's going on here.
Well, then take him out, and we'll bring him back in here in a quick minute when he can start hearing. And then so I don't know what it is. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, my Facebook account, that's the Detective Jason White Facebook account. I don't know what the deal is, but I got suspended. I'm in Facebook jail on that thing for absolutely no reason. And I haven't had an opportunity to be able to, I have sent countless messages to Facebook, and it has all fallen on deaf ears. I don't know what the heck the deal is. So if somebody has a really great idea, then send it my way, because I can't unsuspend it. And you know me, and you've been watching me on any of this stuff. I do not say anything that's controversial on there whatsoever. So I cannot imagine why in the world they would want to suspend me, but that happened. So hopefully we'll get that rectified in the next week or two. I don't know. But anyway, it's going to be a good week. I'm going to we're going to have Phil coming on here in a quick minute. I just want to tell you briefly that he is a warden that was at Kentucky State Penitentiary for 12 years. I'm just going to ask him to tell us about himself, but he was there for 12 years as a warden. And what I liked about Phil, and when I got to know him and speak to him, he is one of those bosses that actually I already can tell you that I liked him. I have tremendous respect for him. He is one of those people that is not somebody that just promoted up through the ranks. He's somebody that actually earned it. And he started at Kentucky State Penitentiary as a correctional officer, and from the very, very low end, walking in the door, bottom rung, and he started from there. And he is somebody that I would consider, at least from what he says as well, he's somebody that is a correctional officer first and then a warden second. So very, very impressed with this guy. And I think that you will be too. I see him shaking his head. So are you good to go now, Troy?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
What was going on? What was the deal?
So I guess I got a phone call, so I've tried to tell everybody to not call me. So I'm using my phone. I did have a laptop, but yeah. So we're good to go, man.
No worries. We're gonna bring Phil on. Phil, come on. I don't want to waste any time with you because you've got a tremendous amount to talk about. Hello, Phil. And hello. He's really an interesting guy. We talked about a lot of different things, and we're going to try to talk about as much of this stuff tonight as possible. I will tell you this in the discussion that I'm gonna apologize up front to him, and that is, number one, he told me to go to page 206 in his book, and he said start reading at 206. That's where you really need to go, and that's where it really talks about an exciting story that we're going to dive into here in a moment. But what I'm getting at is that later on, you said, go ahead and go to the back of the book and read the back chapter. That's the best chapter in the whole book. I want you to do that. I always tell people, do not start at the back of the book, or don't read the back don't read that last chapter. And I'm going to tell you something. I wish you hadn't told me that, because here's the problem. I couldn't do it because you said I could not read the last chapter because I don't want to ruin it for me. So I'm sitting here reading up to. I'm going to have to read up to that. But I did read chapters starting from 206, and I read all the scandal that was going on. And so, tell us a little bit about yourself, Phil.
Well, I started in 1978 as a correctional officer. I had one thing going for me that most correctional officers didn't back in that time period. I had a college degree. I also had a second degree black belt. So that was a benefit to me later on, but it put me in a very awkward position starting out. But I had earned my way because these old school guards wasn't about to accept me into their ranks. To them, I was just a college kid that, so what, I had a black belt in karate, but what really mattered is, would I have their back when shit hit the fan? Would I be, would I back them up and so forth? What kind of guy was I? So they tested me from the very beginning. And that prison during that time was, it was, we say old school, that was old school because there was no policies and procedures. There were no cameras, obviously, during that time period. So we relied on our training and directions from our supervisors to handle whatever situation came along. And I'll have to say, it was a bloody prison every day back in that time period. And it continued that way up through most of the 80s. It was just I think one of the bloodiest prisons in America during that time period. To give you an example, my very first day, and I was nervous, obviously, but as I walked up the steps, 3 men with shotguns came running down the steps, and I had no idea what that was about. But as soon as before the day was over, I learned that 3 inmates had escaped from Fort Cell House. Now, that was my first day. Later on, during my first 6 months, there was another mass escape from 3 Cell House, which is our segregation unit. And then there was a series of murders. Stabbings and murders were pretty routine. And I just thought that was normal. I didn't know those things. I mean, it just seemed normal to me that once that was a climate I walked into. And so it was interesting. I'll have to say that. For some reason, some odd reason, I liked the challenge of working there. It was a challenge, and that's what I liked. I had opportunities to go into law enforcement in several other areas, even the state police, but I turned it all down to work there because of the challenge.
Now I know that you got a pretty you're pretty well educated. And from college is when you ended up going over there. How does one become a warden? And you did that in 12, I think it was, well, I don't know how long it took you to get there, but you got there relatively quickly. And how do you?
I did. I got there quick. It's one of the things you have to understand is it's very rare for a correctional officer to become a warden in the same prison. Usually you have to move around. Now, I did move around in my career, but I came back as warden and stayed for 12 years. Well, 12 years in 2 stints, which there's only, to my knowledge, there's only one other warden in the 140-year history that had a longer term than I did. But it's very hard to start out as a guard or as a correctional officer and work your way to warden. It just doesn't happen very often. Now, there's wardens everywhere that started as a correctional officer, but they end up warden at a different prison. That's pretty common. So I don't know. It's just always my goal to be the warden there. When I saw all the crazy things going on and all the mayhem and all the blood and just the chaos that was every day there, I thought, I can do better. If you give them a chance, I can turn this place around.
Now, Troy, how do you know the warden?
So I started in 1998, and he was warden when I started, and he was there for a while. And he's one that you really had to earn his respect, and he was very stern. So if I would tell people, if you're going, what they told me, if you're going in his office, then it's probably not going to be a good thing for you, because he was strict, very strict. At that time, he had, it was no playing. It was serious, and no laughing, like he is now. But he was just, and he had to be that way because it was a very dangerous and serious place to work, and you had to take it very seriously, and there wasn't no time to joke and play, But even though we had to do that, we all was like a family.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm sure that the turnover rate there is relatively high, just simply because it's never been notorious for, paying a ton of money to work there. I'm sure that you were constantly dealing with staffing issues, et cetera, no doubt. So when you get there, you had told me to ask you about specific things that, or at least we talked about it. And you said, that's what we want to talk about. And I agree. One of them was you talked about and we're darn sure going to get to them. I want to talk about your experience with death row and so forth. But at first, let's talk about that. You said it was the Great Escape of 1988?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. In 1988, June 16th, 8 of the worst inmates that you couldn't hand pick 8 worst inmates that escaped that night about 1:15 in the morning. I wasn't there. I was a deputy warden at another prison. I transferred out, but anyway, that 8 of the worst escaped, and I'm just going to sum it up by saying that not only was it the largest manhunt in the state's history, but it was the largest escape that I know of in the history of the penitentiary, with one exception, and that's also in the book. The exception is, but 3 of the inmates, they split up, and 3 of the inmates, they stole a truck about a mile from the prison, because a lot of the people that live in the prison area would leave the keys in their vehicle, because their rationale was that it'd be better for the inmate to escape inmates, which was kind of routine back in the 70s. It's better if they found the keys in the truck or a car rather than break into a house and hurt somebody, and they're still going to get your keys and take your car anyway. So that was the rationale. That was the mindset of some of the people in the neighborhood. But they found the keys in the truck about a mile away. 5 of them made it to Dover, Tennessee. They split up. 2 of them stole another vehicle and made it to eastern Kentucky, where there was later a shootout and capture. But 3 of them staked out a home, and it was still dark by that time. Staked out a home in a resort area in Dover, Tennessee, on the lake, and they shot the telephone box, which knocked out the telephone, and then they shot an elderly man and woman through their bedroom window. Shot them multiple times. They went in and ransacked the house. They got they got money, some guns, food, and they hightailed it in their car, and they stole their car and hightailed it to Mexico, and they made it across the border. Once they got into Mexico, about 10 miles across the border, they started running out of money, but they didn't want to rob. They didn't want to commit a robbery and draw attention to themselves. So one of the inmates, escapees, had money wired to a Western Union station in El Paso. And when he went across the border to retrieve the money, the FBI was waiting for him and grabbed him. 3 days later, now I don't know how they found out, but I can only guess that the inmate ratted on the others. But anyway, 3 days later, the Mexican police surrounded the motel where they're held up and snatched them and threw them across the border to FBI agents waiting on the other side, which was totally illegal. It was against all the what do you call it? The agreement between two nations. I'm losing the word I'm trying to think of. Treaty. It was against all the treaties and an illegal maneuver. But the three inmates filed. Well, the federal court gave them each a different lawyer, and they started making a plea that their capture was illegal and their extradition back to the United States was illegal, so forth and so on. So it got caught up in the courts for about 15 months, 16 months, and eventually they were extradited back to Kentucky to stand trial for the escape. And then we sent them to Tennessee to stand trial for the murders, and all three received the death penalty in Tennessee. Two of them have since died of natural causes, and one is still on death row in Tennessee. So that's a horrific story. I wrote about it in detail, how they did it. How does 8 inmates escape at one time from the most secure part of the prison? It's an elaborate escape. It took months and months to come up with it and to get everything ready. And then actually 17 inmates were cut out of their cells ready to go. But the 9th one that was coming out the window was too large to fit through the small hole they had cut through the bars. So that wasted a lot of time. And then another inmate tried to come out the window and got about halfway down, and an officer making rounds on the outside caught him. So
Yeah.
So that was the 9th one. The 8th got away though, and it was a horrific ordeal all the way. We probably had 150 law enforcement all total, if you count state police and city police and all the prison staff that came in to hunt for these guys. And that manhunt went on for weeks. I was part of that manhunt because I was at another prison and brought my squad in, my emergency squad in, to assist in quelling the disturbances in the prison and also looking for the escapees. So that's quite a story. You just don't. Nobody had ever. It surprised me. Nobody had ever written about that. Yeah, I mean, it made national news, but you could write a book about just that one story. It's amazing. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I'm going to mention. His book is here. I actually bought this one, and Troy just kept going on about it. He's like, you've got to buy his book. That's it right there. It's on Amazon. We're going to throw up a couple of links also, those little QRC codes you can click on there to find out where to get it. And I'm not kidding you. I'm not an avid reader, Phil. I do not like to sit down and read a book. That's just not me. But when I started reading this, it's actually well written. Did you write all this yourself?
I sure did. Of course. Yeah.
Because
I have 2 editors.
Okay.
I have 2 good editors, and I have a good publisher.
It reads really smooth. You know what I mean? It's not like confusing. You're telling the story. You don't go to it. You describe it really well, and it's just a really good book. I really enjoy it.
Well, here's the secret to that. If there's any law enforcement people, I know you have a lot of followers on this channel. If you're going to write a book about true crime, you need good editors. I had 2, and both were attorneys. One of them was working in the Attorney General's office at the time that he started editing my book. And then I had another attorney from Boston named Christian Grayco, who he's a great editor. He cleaned up he made me look good. And that's essential for a writer, for an author to have good editors. And then I was lucky. I got a publisher right out of the, and that's pretty rare. Genius Publishing is my publishing, published my book, and they jumped on it as soon as I sent them the manuscript. So, and I've had a really good experience with them. So they like true crime, by the way. They will.
Why?
I think they like all kinds of, but true crime seems to be their specialty.
Well, it sells. And that's why, and also people are fascinated with homicide because they just can't believe that people could actually do that to another human being. And more than that, they're fascinated about prisons. They don't want them in their backyard. It's kind of that little thing, NIMBY, not in my backyard, but they want to know what's going on up in there. So that's why those television shows are really fascinating.
Do you think people realize that we had murders in prison? I mean, we investigated murders just like you do on the street. We would usually we would always call in the state police to follow up. But by the time they got there, we had the case solved. We would have the suspect in custody. We would have the evidence, usually blood splatter on shoes or shirts or whatever. Yeah. And we had murder after murder in the 70s. It was quite an ordeal. And there again, eventually that calmed down, but it was many, many years before it did.
Go ahead, Troy. Do you have something?
Oh no, I was listening.
Yeah, I tell you, I went and visited with a murderer down in Oklahoma. In our. Hey, show that picture of the castle on the Cumberland, would you, Amanda? That quick picture of the prison. Yep, that's what it looks like. I mean, it looks like a castle, and that's not really the picturesque one. I didn't send that to her. I sent this one to her. But there's another one where it overlooks Lake Barkley. It's actually beautiful. But that prison looks. I mean, it was actually started housing inmates, I think, in 1890. So it's really old. Yeah. And it's got like huge 3,000 blocks of limestone. And the thing is built. I mean, I know that it's probably, you guys had some issues there probably with plumbing and God only knows what in there.
When I started, you might be surprised that the two original cell blocks were still in use. When I started in 1978, Cell House 1 and Cell House 2, I sent a picture. You may have that picture of the old dungeon type looking cells. Well, anyway, if you don't, that's 3-cell house. That's the segregation unit where Troy worked. But there's anyway, the old prison was still pretty much original when I started. Now, those areas have since been renovated. They're no longer in use. And they've been designated other things. But anyway, we've added 2 cell blocks in my time. So.
Yeah. Well, let's go real quick. I'm going to go, since we've been talking about murder, I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, the death squad. I mean, the death row, show the electric chair, Amanda. You had an electric chair there, and you also had lethal injection. And so it moved to that. You told me you witnessed 2 executions in your time there. Was it as a warden on both?
Yeah, I was a warden. I oversaw the executions. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, because you had a really interesting story about some interaction with one of the inmates.
Yeah, I thought it was important to take the reader behind the scenes. What happens behind the curtains? I mean, and I wrote in detail. The only thing I didn't divulge is the identity of the executioners and the execution team. That's confidential. But other than that, I considered everything fair game. I was a warden over the last electrocution. I doubt there'll ever be another electrocution in Kentucky. And that was in 1997. In that execution, Harold McQueen was the person we executed. It was about, I had installed new electrical equipment because the equipment that we had before I replaced it was built in, I think it was manufactured in 1957. Now here's an interesting fact that might surprise you. That's the original chair you just saw. Now we've stripped it and refinished it, but anyway, now it looks like it's more like an oak chair rather than that dark lacquer finish. But that chair was built by Peter Wade Depp, DEPP, and that's it. That's the original chair. The chair, if you saw a modern picture, a picture of it today, it would look a little bit different because that lacquer finish has been stripped and now it's just an oak chair. You notice it has 3 legs. It's a 3-legged chair. Yeah. Okay. That was built by Peter Wade Depp in 1910. He also built the electro, I think it's called a dynamo. which actually, you've always heard where the stories that the lights would dim in the community and so forth. Well, it would. When they started that old dynamo, and it had to build up speed, and then it stored that electricity in a capacitor, and it would release it all at once. And so, yeah, the lights would blink when they started that, not when they executed, but when they started that old dynamo. Peter Wade Depp also built that. Now, he's, I don't know how many great grandfathers he is, but Johnny Depp is a descendant. The actor
Really?
Johnny Depp is a descendant. Yeah, he was born in Owensboro, and that's where. So anyway, that's the history of the chair. Yeah, 1927, there were 7 inmates executed, and that's the record in the United. Well, I don't think it's a world record, but it's a record in the United States. 7 in one night.
Wow.
And there was so it has a lot of history.
What was the year?
History I don't particularly like, but we switched to lethal injection in 1999. I wrote the procedures for that and carried out the first lethal injection. Now, both executions have stories behind the scenes that I wrote about. I'll tell you one of them, just real briefly. Harold McQueen, who we were about to execute, of course, I offered him a final meal. What do you want for your last meal? And he said, all I want is cheesecake. I said, are you sure? He said, yeah, that's all I want, cheesecake. I said, what about a T-bone steak or something? And no, all I want is cheesecake. So I passed that information on to the food service supervisor. She made a cheesecake. She bought a cheesecake. She made, I don't know, she overdid it. She probably had 4 or 5 cheesecakes for his last meal. So he had his chaplain with him. And there was enough there for the execution team. Whether or not, I don't know whether they had any or not. I don't know. Don't care. If they did, that's fine. But when I went down, I could see on the cameras I thought they were finished with their meal. I wanted to go down and check on things and check to see if he liked his last meal and so forth. When I went down, when he saw me, he was real, I think, pleasantly surprised to see me. Hey, Warden, come here and sit down. What's up? He said, have some of this cheesecake. It's so good. And I knew, I thought, how can I turn it? I thought, nah, I can't do that. But there's cameras all over the place down there. And we had live feeds going all the way to the governor's office, or Frankfort, the command center in Frankfort, which was where the governor was, and the Supreme Court, the Kentucky Supreme Court. And everybody in our command center was watching everything that went on down there. And here I am faced with this inmate just pleading with me to sit down and let's have some cheesecake. So I thought, how can I turn that down? It seemed like a human thing to do to me to sit. It's okay. Yeah. All right. So he sliced me some cheesecake and I sat down and choked it down. I couldn't believe it. He was so cordial. And then before it was over, he and his chaplain wanted to offer a prayer. And we sat there and prayed for a minute. And I said, Harold, we're going to have to, in just a few minutes, we're going to have to shave your head, give you a shower, get you ready for the the last step. I said, are you doing okay? He said, yeah, I'm doing okay. You don't worry about me. He said, I know where I'm going to be in the next couple of hours. Okay. I think you do. All right. When I come for you, all I'm going to do is come up to your cell door and say it's time. And you follow me to the chair and you will not be manhandled. We will not, there'll be nothing. You just walk in on your own steam and sit down. We'll take care of it from there. He said, you can count on it. So you will not have any trouble from me. And that's the way it played out. So that is behind the scenes. That's what happens for an execution behind the scenes. Now I'll leave the next one, the first lethal injection. I had a final request from that inmate too, and I'll leave it for the reader to read about that because I don't want to spoil the book for whoever may want to read it. But there was another very similar circumstance. At the very last minute, the inmate pleaded with me to carry out a special favor for him, and I did. So,
I think people don't realize. I think people, the listeners that are watching this, or the watchers and the listeners, somebody had actually asked the question, why would you want to work somewhere so violent and negative, and how does it not get to you? And well, I mean, that is a fair question. Why? What was it that drew you to go to that prison and start working there? Because it's like you've been institutionalized too, Phil. You spent how much of your life in prison? And we talked about this.
I grew up in prison. I grew up in prison. I grew old in prison. Why would you want to do it? I explained that in the very beginning because it was a challenge. I came to work just to see what in the hell would happen next. I mean, it was that chaotic. I thought, for a while it was fun, and then it became not so fun. When I had a friend of mine murdered in there, female employee was murdered one day, 1984. Now nothing tops that. And then you realize, that could have been me. And in a hostage situation, I was confronted with the hostage. I was on the E squad or the emergency squad, which is CERT team or SWAT team, whatever you want to call it. We called it the E squad. I was placed on that almost the first year I was there. I was a hostage negotiator, and sure enough, we had a hostage situation. That, by the way, that hostage situation, the hostage taker is the main character in my book. In the preface, it starts with hostage taking, and I'm negotiating, and eventually we negotiate the release of the hostage, even though we had a green light to kill him. The warden told us to kill him if we could get a clear shot, and I was trying my best to lure him out in the open so we could kill him. And I know that's not a polite word. Say kill him.
Who was the hostage?
Eliminate him.
Was it the hostage an employee, or was it an
employee, a correctional officer, okay. And it was in 3 cell house where Troy worked. That's the most dangerous place in the prison, but that's where it occurred. And it turned out to be a soap gun, but we didn't know. You have to treat it as a real thing. I could see the gun against his head.
Yeah.
We preserved the gun. It's somewhere. I may have sent you a picture of it, but
I saw the picture.
It's just a little soap gun that's been faded now. But anyway, and that character, his nickname was Snake. He committed one of the most violent murders that we had ever seen. I forgot what year it is, but it was before the hostage situation. He stabbed an inmate 56 times, literally ripped his chest apart, a knife in each hand, and just mutilated his chest. And that story I went into great detail. I mean, I knew all the facts in that case, and he got a life sentence out of that, by the way. Now, this is the main character. He ends up in the very last chapter. Did you read the last chapter?
No,
okay.
Because you made the mistake of saying, I tell everybody, do not read that last chapter until you've read it. And I was like, but then you said, but I want you to read the last chapter. And I was like, I can't read the last.
Okay, this character named Snake, William Willem, comes back to life in the last chapter, and it's a good ending. Believe it or not, I know it's a dark, old, dreary, bloody prison. How can you work there? How can you stand it? So forth and so on. Why would you want to work there your entire career? Well, when you read the last chapter, you'll understand why. It's in the last chapter, and this guy Snake, this hostage taker, he surfaces again in the last chapter, and it's all good. It's not bad at all.
Now, listen, Phil. If I know Troy, I've met him, I've hung out with him. I probably know him more than any other correctional officer that I've ever. I mean, I've hung out with a lot of correctional officers from Kentucky specifically, more than anywhere. But if you hang out with Troy, and I'm sure Phil, you're the same way to some extent. I think we talked about this. Your head is on the swivel still to this day when you're out and about. Yep. More so than me. And I don't, because the difference between your job and mine is that for me, I see these guys on their best behavior because they want to look like, oh no, I could have never done that. Mm-hmm. You get them when they've already been found guilty, and now the rest of their life potentially could be spent in prison. So there's no real incentive to be good, I guess. That's over with. But what I wanted to say, and Troy, jump in here if you agree. I don't know if you agree with me or not. I haven't talked to you about this specifically. But I know for me, I can't help but there's guys that I've known they're criminals. They're gangsters. They're they're gang members, they've done this and that, but some of them, they're likable. I mean, they're charismatic. And for you guys, you get to know them because you're living with them in essence for 20 years, maybe. I mean, Troy, you worked there for 20, right?
Yeah, 21 and some change. And yeah, you build like it's not a relationship because there's a line, but you're with them every day, and they, they expect stuff from you. Expect them to do what they're supposed to do, and that's where you gain respect from them. I'll tell you one story, and I won't be long, and I'll tell on myself. But I was picked to take this inmate to Louisville to his hospital. His mom was dying, and this inmate, he was a very dangerous inmate. I'm talking about Leo Sperling, very dangerous. And it was 4 of us that went, and we got to the hospital. I said, well, I'm gonna go to the room and check it out. And they hung out down there, and I went in there and I spoke with his sister, and I said, well, we're gonna come up here and we're gonna let him visit. If somebody tries to come down the hall or tries to come in, this visit will be over. And so I searched the area real good. I searched his mom was dying. So, I searched the bed for weapons and all that. And so Leo went in there, and he was, first time, you can't imagine Leo Sperling crying, but yeah, he was crying, and they got 30 minutes.
He was one of the 8 that escaped, Troy.
Yeah. Very dangerous. Yeah, they call yeah. So, and he's still in the prison system somewhere.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, I gave him extra time with his mother, and he appreciated it. That was respect right there. That I really wasn't supposed to do that, but I gave him a little bit extra time, and you know what? He remembered that to the day I retired. He said, you know what? I want to tell you something. I remember 17, 18 years ago. He said, I remember you giving me that extra time. And, my wife worked there, and them guys, they look out for certain people. If inmates was to jump on them guys would actually come down there and probably kill them.
They would, but let's keep in mind, like Leo Sperling, he's probably a good example, but let's just keep in mind, yes, he appreciated it, and he respected you for that, and because you showed respect, but never forget, he's probably a classic sociopath. If you're in his way, if he were escaping, he would kill you.
Yeah.
And not blink an eye.
That's right.
That's the nature of who we worked with. There was a lot of sociopaths that would, they talk a good game. They're polite. They're respectful. They'll respect you. They might even look out for you and save your life. But if you're in their way of something they want, like escape, they'll kill you. I mean, that's just who we dealt with. And that's an example of a sociopath.
Sally, welcome to Jackie Muse, past guest. Actually, she spent time in prison too, but she's doing great. She was actually on the show, Phil. I don't discriminate against anybody. I bring them on here if they're interesting people. Listen, there's one thing, and I was curious too. You're the kind of warden too there's something else that just stuck out to me that I really liked is the fact that you actually you'd go eat whatever they're eating, and you would walk the yard and interact with inmates.
Every time.
And you wouldn't be with guards. You would just walk out there and start interacting. And I think that says a lot about you and probably the respect that they had for you in return.
Well, I
bet you money don't, and I'm not being negative, but that there's probably not another warden that goes out by themselves and deals and talks with the inmates and with the killers and the murderers out there. That that don't happen anymore.
Well, I had the chance to tour the Kentucky State Reformatory, which was fascinating. And I remember the deputy warden taking me where they made the license plates, which was awesome. It's just something to see. It's something not everybody gets to see that. And it was pretty amazing. Hey, now I want to talk to you about a couple other things since we were talking about death row and stuff. And I at least want to mention this because you have a really fascinating story about this. And I had asked you, and actually in the chapter when it starts at 206, page 206, you start talking about not just a couple of not just a couple of your workers that were involved in a love affair, so to speak, with two inmates on death row, but you had I didn't get to the part where you talked about all the other corruption that was going on, but I'm curious about, and maybe we'll have a chance, but I really want to talk about your two guards or correction officers that were basically messing around with the inmates on death row.
Yep. Well, I was faced with that when I first came back to Kentucky from Ohio, where I was a warden in Ohio, but to run a penitentiary. I had left Kentucky for 4 years and came back. That's the first thing I was confronted with was it was rumored that there was a love affair between two employees and two death row inmates. And I thought, how can that be? But so I started, I heard it from more than one source, my top staff. So I started looking into it, and sure enough, I came to believe that there was, we started targeting their mail and their phone calls. And we subpoenaed their phone records from their home phone records and found numerous phone calls from death row to their home phone. I thought that was enough to fire them, but apparently my supervisors didn't think so. So that started the investigation, and then the inmates were receiving all kinds of cards and letters that were unsigned, love letters and love cards or whatever you want to call it, almost on a daily basis. And so they didn't know we were doing this, but we would rush those to the crime lab some 200 miles away in Frankfurt, trying to get prints and we even hired a handwriting, someone to do the handwriting analysis to see if there was a match with the written reports, and there wasn't. We finally got a thumbprint on one of them, and I busted her and tried to get her to roll on the other one. But meanwhile, the FBI was calling me saying, you got two death row inmates that are going to escape. He had information from his sources that this was going on, and I was able to interview her, and I was able to interview another informant that, of course, I have to leave. I can't divulge that or really what that person told me. But meanwhile, I asked for an undercover state trooper to come in and start investigating other corruption cases, and we were able to do that. I finally got a tape recording of one of the other female employee that was in love with the death row inmate, her telling he loved her, she loved him, so forth and so on. And we busted her. So those kind of things happen in prison. Now, I wrote about it in detail in the book because it's so interesting. Now, these two inmates, by the way, actually there were three of them. They robbed a doctor in eastern Kentucky. He had squirreled away some $2 million in cash from his practice, I suppose. And he also had some coal mines. I don't know where he got the money. It doesn't matter. But anyway, he had in his home over $2 million, well, at least $2 million in cold hard cash. Somehow they found out about it, and they did a home invasion, killed his daughter, and strangled him. Thought he was dead, but he wasn't. And then they hightailed it to Florida. There was 5 of them. One of them was a correctional officer from Brushy Mountain Prison in Tennessee that Benny Hodge had fell in love with. Well, she had fell in love with him, I should say. And she was one of the 5. They got to Florida and finally got to Florida and rented a motel room and split up the money. They started counting it in piles to split it up. They stopped counting at $1.6 million. Now, she's telling me this with the FBI sitting right there beside her. Mm-hmm. Of course, I already knew the crime story, but I acted like I didn't. But she was trying to tell me, you've got an employee there that's madly in love with him. She's going to help him escape. And I said, how do you know this? And anyway, we got into all that. Finally, I said, well, this conversation, I said, how much money was there total? And she said, well, we split it up when we got to 1.6 million because everyone was so tired. I said, how much was there? She said, well, Benny dumped the money on our pile of money. And so I said, okay, was it $2 million? He said, oh yeah, it was every bit of $2 million. So where is it now? And she said, so when we were on the run, I gave it to a cop in Tennessee. That's what she told me. She told the FBI the same thing. Does he still have it? She said, I have no idea, but Benny thinks I have it. When he finds out he doesn't, he's going to escape and kill me. That's why you've got to stop the escape. And so, I mean, that's how serious this thing got. Meanwhile, I was hearing that I had death threats on me from various sources because I was cracking down on drugs inside the prison, and the drug dealers were letting my internal affairs staff know that I had death threats on me. This thing went on and on. That was my first year back as warden. The death row investigation, the Aryan Brotherhood had corrupted some staff. I brought in an undercover state trooper to work as a correctional officer, and we finally cleaned it all up. Believe it or not, within 2 years, by the end of the second year, murders and everything had settled way down. Most of the corrupt staff resigned if I didn't fire them, or if we didn't arrest them. A few were arrested for bringing in drugs, but after that, it calmed down, and the penitentiary became a pretty good place to work, to be honest with you. And I'll tell you, inmates like law and order, believe it or not. They'll tell you they don't, but they do. They want to live in a clean, safe place, just like we do. Yeah. And staff want to work in a clean, safe place. And that's what I set out to do. And I think by the second year, Troy, you can jump in, but I think we pretty much had a handle on it by the end of my second year as warden.
Oh yeah, it was really good. I mean, well, when you come the second time, I mean, it was a little different, but everything was pretty smooth.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And
well, what was it?
You just love to work there.
What was the difference between the first time and the second time, Troy? I mean, was he nicer the second time, or?
Oh yeah, he was more laid back. Yeah. No. But Phil Parker, you had to. I mean, like I said, you had to earn his respect. You had to really know him, and that's something that I got to. I was able to do, and now we're, really good friends. But yeah, it's. We was all like a family in there, and
yep.
And I love the place, I really do, and but I don't want to go back.
Tell us some of these pictures. What are we looking at?
Okay, here? That's the emergency squad from 1978. I'm the young guy about the third row back on the left. Tall guy.
Let me mention something real quick. You had told me about that show. What was the show? What was the name of that show that you said profiled your prison? I'm not talking about
Big House.
Big House.
Oh, it's called Big House. Okay.
Yeah.
So after I got off the phone with you, Phil, I actually found that episode. It's on Amazon. So those of you that are interested in watching Big House, you're going to have to go to Amazon to find it, and then you go to season 2. And it's like towards the end. It's like episode 8 or 9 or something. Does that sound right?
Well, there's also Lockup, MSNBC Lockup. Now, Big House was before that.
This is Big House. So you can actually watch Big House, and actually you can watch Lockup that profiles the Castle on the Cumberland or Kentucky State Penitentiary, whichever you prefer saying. But that's actually profiled Lockup. You can watch that on YouTube. Those episodes are right there.
Yeah, YouTube.
But I was actually stoked that it was on Amazon, and it was free.
I am too. I didn't know. We also did a program called Forbidden Places, which was on Discovery Channel, and that was back during the 90s. So I have to look for it. I can't find it, but I didn't look that hard. But
you're in that episode quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
I know Troy's in Lockup from here and there. You're in Lockup, but you actually were the younger version.
I'm walking. Phil. Yeah, I'm walking down the walk, but you wouldn't notice me.
In that Lockup, I'm escorting they film it. I'm escorting a reporter to interview a renowned Don Tate, who was an escape artist, and he had escaped several times. But anyway, she wanted to interview him, and so the warden gave me the assignment to escort her to interview this inmate. I started hearing frantic radio traffic that there was something going on. I said, I got to get this reporter and the cameraman off the yard. So I said, follow me. I interrupted the interview and said, come with me. And when we got to where the officers are dispatched, which is called the yard office, which is the safest place on the yard, and that's where I wanted to take this cameraman and reporter because I knew something was going on. I didn't really know what, but there had been a stabbing in the gymnasium. And just as we got to the door to go in the yard office, an inmate ran in front of me as the door opened. It's always locked, but as they opened the door for me, he ran in front of me, and we went in, and he dropped right at my feet. And he was the stabbing victim. So I started looking him over for a wound. I mean, he wasn't bleeding a lot, but I found a stab wound right in his ribs on his right side. So I put his head in my lap and I pinched this, I applied pressure. I just pinched off that stab wound. And about 2 minutes later, the nurse and two inmate medical aides came. And one of the inmates started doing CPR on him, and it was blowing blood bubbles in my hand. So I knew he was dead. The stab wound hit an artery in the lung. He died right in my lap. Now, here's the kicker. The cameraman never turned off his camera. He got it all on tape, and they played it on Big House.
Really?
Yeah, I'm the young guy. I'm the young guy.
That must be towards the end because I haven't.
I don't know where it is, but I don't like to watch it. But brings back bad memories.
Right.
But,
well, listen,
that's just another day. That's just another day in the castle. Back in that time period.
I'll tell you my experience. First of all, I'm fascinated. When I've went to the prison, I've went to several prisons and interviewed people here in Oklahoma specifically. But I've been to the Supermax in Florence, Colorado.
Yep.
But aside from that, just going to the major prisons that are located here in Oklahoma, Big Mac is like our castle on the Cumberland. Yep. Okay. And it's in McAllister. And you go to any of these prisons, just as my perspective, you're going to hear my perspective as a cop. Well, first of all, when I'm walking through there now, most of those guys, they watch us on TV. They still show that stuff on TV. It's a popular, unless they're restricted from doing it. They can watch us on TV and they recognize you. But it's still a little unnerving when you're walking the yard. And you just you are not in control of what could happen in a quick second. I mean, you're just not. Is that true? I mean, I know there's guards up on a tower.
Well, most cops told me I've given tours to state police, FBI, you name it. They all come through. They want to see the penitentiary. Of course, they have to disarm. They have to leave their firearm, outside. And everyone was I don't know how you do it. I mean, they were apprehensive, to say that, putting it mildly. Yeah. And I said, we do it
their world.
Well, yeah. I said, you do this every day? Walk out here? I said, yeah. And I said, not only that, you haven't seen anything until you run to a fight. And Troy's probably done this. You get a radio call, there's a fight on the yard. And as a correctional officer, we run to that, and we don't have arms. We're not carrying pistols and shotguns and whatever. On an everyday basis, we have maybe a pair of handcuffs and maybe a radio, and maybe I don't know. Today they might have mace or OC, but back in my day we didn't. Well, we had mace.
Yeah.
And we'd run to a fight, and there might be a stabbing. And my first use of force, I went in a cell, number 2 man in a cell, and disarmed. He had a knife. That was my first use of force. I'd been there about 6 weeks when that happened.
Listen, Phil, my producer, Amanda, that we visited with before, she's behind the curtain. She's up in Canada. She's like, you got to wrap it up. We got to get off here. How quick does 54 minutes go? It goes really good. But she was
it did. Yeah.
She gave us the full 54, and we appreciate that.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That is what is that, real quick?
That was just a joke that I helped design for it to go on a T-shirt.
Listen, I cannot thank you enough, Phil, for coming
Well,
on.
thank you.
From
Okay,
what
my pleasure.
Troy keeps telling me, he's like you're a legend in DOC in Kentucky. I know you spent a ton of time in Ohio. You've served as the warden at many prisons, not just that,
Right.
but others as well. And you were way up the chain when it comes to corrections. So, man, sir, I mad respect for you. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you.
I consider you a friend. I'm going to probably be calling you after I finish this book.
Absolutely. Call anytime.
We can talk for a while, and literally, I'm thrilled to have had you on, Troy.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing.
Thank you, Troy.
Hey, and a shout out to all my Jenny Stewart people that I work as a guard again.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, ladies and
My
gentlemen,
pleasure.
thank you so much. We can't stay long on here. Next week, we're probably going to take the week off, and then probably the next week off because of Thanksgiving, but we'll replay something. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it, and take us out, Amanda.